Going to spend some more time now thinking about the doctors' strike, the junior doctors' strike, which is currently ongoing in England today. It's been certainly caused the postponement of a large number of operations and appointments as well. Sandwell Hospital in West Bromwich has declared a level 4 incident, ordering strikers to return to work. So there are clearly some pinch points right now this morning. Junior doctors are providing emergency care only. The dispute with the government is over these new NHS contracts. Are they right to strike? That's the question we've been posing this morning. Joining us now to discuss that, Kate Andrews, Research Fellow at the independent think tank, the Adam Smith Institute. She's in our central London studio. And from Beverley in Yorkshire, the GP, Dr. Zoe Norris, who has over 10 years' experience of working in the NHS. Good morning to both of you. Zoe, if we can start with you, as somebody who's a practitioner, what is so objectionable to junior doctors about these new contracts? What's getting their goat?
I think the issue as far as junior doctors are concerned is the worry over patient safety and the fact that the government isn't listening to their concerns about this at all. And this is in the background of a culture where we are told and now encouraged by people like Mr Hunt to be blowing the whistle on unsafe activity, to be expressing concerns about patients throughout the NHS. And you've got 50,000 junior doctors nearly who are saying this is going to affect patient safety adversely. We are worried about this contract, and the feeling amongst them is that is just not being listened to by the government.
Yeah, I mean, Kate, in terms of the ballot for industrial action, one thing we can all agree on is that of those junior doctors polled, there was a vast majority of them who felt so strongly about this that they were prepared to countenance strike action. They feel very strongly.
Well, I'm not surprised that junior doctors think that they deserve a certain level of pay. I think we can all agree that they deserve a large level of pay. The job they do is very important. The real culprit today is the British Medical Association. They have encouraged junior doctors to put patient safety at risk over one sticking point. When the government met with the BMA, they were able to agree on 15 out of 16 points. They've decided to strike over one today. That, to me, does not seem legitimate at all, especially when the public is on the side of the junior doctors. Can't these be carried out through negotiations? Even if it takes a bit longer, is it really worth putting patients at risk over one sticking point that could still be discussed?
Zoe Norris, you're shaking your head. Is it worth the candle?
I'd like to make 3 points, please. The first one is that this isn't about pay, it's about patient safety as the main priority. Second one is that the government don't seem to be clear on how many points there are sticking in the junior contract. Some days it's 16, 15, 17, they're not quite sure. And the third point I'd like to make is that actually this is a fundamental problem to do with trust. It's a fundamental problem to do with junior doctors not being listened to about the worries over patient safety. And the government are trying to spin this in a number of ways. We've seen negative press tactics. We've seen communication between the head of NHS England and Downing Street. There is no trust left here. And when the main point agree on is the point that undermines patient safety, junior doctors have been left with absolutely no choice, and it is with heavy hearts that they and any NHS member of staff would be striking today. I'd also like to add, we are on a bank holiday service. This is an emergency service today. It is exactly the same service that was provided in the NHS on Christmas Day, on bank holidays. This is no different, so patients are no more at risk now than they were then, and that is not being made clear.
Okay, there is a feeling, go on.
Well, the one sticking point that the BMA and the government seem to agree they can't agree on is the pay that junior doctors will be getting over the weekends. So it does seem to be about pay. And it's ridiculous to say that patients aren't being put at risk today. Over 4,000 operations, serious operations, have had to be canceled. Operations that would not have been booked on, say, a bank holiday have been canceled today.
Yeah,
in the medium term, this is going to be hugely problematic.
Let's try and find some things we can agree on. I mean, you know, Zoe, that's true. I mean, you know, it's demonstrably true that appointments have been cancelled. You know, there will be some knock-on, right?
There will be knock-on in the sense that, you know, there are going to be patients out there who have had elective procedures cancelled, who have had clinic appointments cancelled. And I'm sure that every single doctor who is on strike today is sorry about that and appreciates fully the inconvenience that that causes. But there is an emergency service in place, and I'm afraid the whole point of a strike is to cause disruption and is to cause problems for the government and to put pressure on them to return to the table with a reasonable offer and to listen to the genuine concerns. Otherwise, there is no point in striking. But this situation, and talking about patients being put at risk, there is full emergency cover. If patients' lives are at risk, they will be seen and assessed entirely accurately, appropriately, and in a timely manner.
Okay, 2:30. Oh, go on.
I think we need to be more honest about this situation. Today is not simply about patient safety. It's about the treatment of junior doctors. Now, a point that you and I might be able to agree on is that they deserve better treatment. Flag up that this is what happens not only for patients, but also for doctors when you have a monopoly in healthcare. You can only negotiate with one person, and that person is a big bureaucratic government body. And if they don't listen to you, you have no say. In the same way that if patients aren't listened to, they can't go anywhere else. There's a fundamental problem with this system, and we know for a long time now that the system hasn't been benefiting patients as we thought it was. The UK, the NHS, in fact, just last year, was ruled to be poor to mediocre according to the OECD standards. It's also hurting doctors. And I think that if the British Medical Association were actually concerned about its doctors, it would be addressing the whole system. Instead, it's lobbying for higher pay, not addressing the system, and putting patients at risk today.
Zoe, back in the early... Oh, go on.
That?
Go on, you're making my life very easy. I'm not having to put any questions to either of you.
I think I would agree with you partly, but I think that you're wrong in terms of thinking what needs to happen with the system. The issue is that trust has been lost between not only junior doctors, but GPs like myself, consultants, nurses, and we now are seeing are coming out in protest. All of those professions have lost trust in the government. What the government needs to do is to step up and listen to the calls for a cross-party independent commission on the future of the NHS, so that we can have an open discussion about what needs to happen to the NHS as a model moving forward, what is sustainable and what the country needs to make it safe for the future.
What about the trust between doctors and their patients? Taxpayers are out there putting their money forward, and actually some are saying, take more of my money to pay these junior doctors. But we're doing that under the assumption that when we show up to the hospital, they're going to be there. You keep talking about this trust between doctors and the government. Isn't one of the most fundamental trusts in a competent society the trust between doctors and patients?
And that trust between doctors and patients is absolutely fundamental. It's something that we take an oath on. The first do no harm.
But there are some things that are
bigger than junior doctors. Junior doctors cannot solve all the problems of the NHS in one day.
Okay, I'm going to get a question in. Zoe, back in the day, or at least back in the 1990s, I was the health correspondent for the Yorkshire Post. You're up there in Yorkshire. I remember doing stories then about junior doctors lamenting the ridiculous working hours they had to work. There was a slight sense. It was a bit like the old fagging system in public schools. You know, I did it. It was done to me, it was done unto me, and therefore I will do it unto you. And I think there was some truth in that, wasn't there? But my point is, back then, more than 20 years ago, junior doctors were working ludicrously long hours. You know, that's just fact of life.
I think you're right, yes, and I think if you talk to consultants now, they remember those days. They remember how unsafe and unsupported they felt, but also that the mix of patients was totally different. And when I worked nights as a junior doctor, I was on call for 7 nights in a row, working 14-hour shifts. I literally did not sit down. Whereas the days that the consultants trained in, when they would be on call maybe for 3 or 4 days, there used to be hot food provided, there used to be rest breaks, there were beds, they would sleep for a period of time, and that just isn't the case now. It's a totally different job. And while it's a good way of learning, actually it's increasingly dangerous to put tired doctors on the front line.
Kate, employers, regardless of where you are, they love flexibility, they love productivity, they love the idea of staff being able to be moved around to fill gaps in rotas. And that makes, that makes sense if you're the people as taxpayers who are coughing up. You could argue, and we've already had one doctor on this morning who argues exactly this point. He says in terms of things like continuity of care, you get a situation where that flexibility means that you do a couple of days here, you pick up a patient, then you have to drop them, you have a day off, but maybe you've done the night shift the night before and then you've got the day to sleep during the day. It's done for the convenience of the NHS managers, but the impact is negatively being felt, not just by junior doctors, but ultimately by patients too.
Well, again, it doesn't seem to me like...
on night shifts.
Oh, no, Zoe, you have to just bide your time, Zoe. Just hang on, Kate. That was a question for you.
Well, it seems to me like this isn't the fundamental issue of the day. These new contracts are actually going to lower the maximum hours that doctors are allowed to work in any given week, and that's actually a European law that's affecting the NHS. So when doctors are out there today, and the BMA specifically is out there today talking about the dangerous hours that doctors are having to work, nobody wants doctors working dangerous hours. That's why the maximum hours they're going to be allowed to work is actually being decreased. Again, I want to get back to this question of what is this strike really about today? Seems like there's a lot of jumping jumping around, especially with the BMA, about, well, when we start to realize that junior doctor salaries are slightly higher than they said, we start to realize that they're going to be working less hours than they suggested. They jump around to different topics, and I'm still trying to figure out what is so specific to today's strike that makes it legitimate to walk out on patients.
Zoe Norris, I'll give you the very brief and last word. 10 seconds, please.
The reason junior doctors are walking out today is because patient safety will be put at risk if this contract comes through. The safeguards are not adequate and their voices are not being listened to by the government. And to prevent future strikes, that is what the government needs to do.
Zoe Norris, Kate Andrews, very interesting. Thanks very much indeed for your time. Thanks a lot. Jane.
Still to come on Sky News.
I swear to God, once you pass 40, your eyebrows give birth overnight. Gotcha.